All right, video sharing should be enabled now. I don't know why Zoom defaults to that not being enabled. Oh, fantastic. I see you. Sideena, wonderful. I see people. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. Got a little bit of a late start, so we can go a little later. It's okay. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for joining us for a fireside chat with Professor Sonya Smith, moderated by Sideena Grace. Really excited to get into what we're going to talk about today, but you're not here to listen to me, so I think we should just get going. Let's do introductions.
Well, hello everyone. Like Keyshawn said, I'm moderating for today's fireside chat. A little bit about me. I am an aerospace engineer. I graduated from MIT with my master's in aerospace engineering and a focus in bioastronautics, so the study of human spaceflight. I am also an author of Adventures with Sideena, ABCs in Space. And lastly, I'm the founder of Grace Innovations, which is a company dedicated to creating inclusive health and wellness products for both Earth and space. Today, I'll be joined with Dr. Sonya Smith for this fireside chat to learn more about her journey. And we can get started with her introduction.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sonya Smith. I'm a professor in the mechanical engineering department at Howard University. I'm aerospace engineering by training. Graduated from the University of Virginia, and we spent a sabbatical at MIT AeroAstro where I met Sideena Grace. So it's great to be here today to chat with you.
Awesome, awesome. Well, following my questions with Dr. Smith, we'll open it up for the audience to ask her questions. But now that you know a little bit about us, I want to kind of get in a little bit more background about you, Dr. Smith, and telling us about your background and how you got to where you are and to becoming an aerospace engineer.
Sure. So my parents were educators at an HBCU, Virginia State University, in outside of Petersburg, Virginia. And my mother was in mathematics, and my father was in history. And about when I was in the second grade, they went off to get their PhDs at Indiana University, and I had both the grounding at the HBCU, but also exposure to a different environment, PWI at Indiana University. I got to be interested in model rockets. I was visited NASA frequently on field trips. I was enrolled in astronomy. Astronomy, it was like a field astronomy course in the summers and field geography. So I really had some great after-school enrichment programs, both through Virginia State. I'm not saying that it's all at the PWI, but also at Indiana University as well. And so that really honed my interest in all things aerospace. And then after graduation, I worked for two contractors at NASA Langley, and that was really pivotal because it allowed me to see many aspects of the aerospace industry at that lab and really hone and decide what I wanted to focus on in graduate school. So in a nutshell, that's how I arrived here.
Awesome, awesome. So you said you worked at NASA. What was that deciding factor that made you want to go to grad school after your experience there?
I think once my parents got their PhDs, because before that, I didn't, as a kid, I didn't know what that really meant. But once they got their PhDs, and particularly once my mother received her PhD in STEM, in mathematics, I think I was always just like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow this path as well. I didn't know that I would be a university professor, although my father, predicted that as well. But it was just a matter of what area I wanted to focus on. And so, being at NASA, as I said, being exposed to different areas of aerospace, the aerospace industry, one of the things I realized is that the majority of those making the decisions on the direction of research, what types of projects, what people work on in the group and those kinds of things, those people generally had PhDs or master's degrees, but the majority had PhDs. So I knew that I had to further my education in order to, really set a direction for the research that I wanted to do.
Okay, well, speaking of projects, as you know, while in grad school, many of us work on one or a few projects. Was there ever a time where you had a project that you realized wasn't for you, and how did you pivot to find what was for you?
Yeah, that happens. I've been in this business for a long time, so that's happened several times. And I think the key is finding a pivot point. If you get into something and it's not what you thought it was going to be, or the direction is changing, or the personnel changing, you have to find a pivot point. So usually, on large projects, you have a segment or you have a portion of a segment. It's good to end well, so you don't leave people hanging. You finish your part and then pivot on. But it's very important to know, a mentor said this to me a long time ago. It's very important to know to not run from something, to make sure that you're leaving to go to something important. So yes, you may not like what you're doing, or you're not interested anymore, or it's not working out for whatever reason, but you have to have a direction. Okay, what do you want to do? And so once you know what you want to do, you can help yourself find your direction and your ultimate career path, because there's going to be fits and starts. Things are not going to work out. People go to graduate school, they think they want to work on one thing, and then that doesn't work out. Either there's a mismatch with the project, mismatch with the advisor, what have you. It's quickly, you figure that out quickly, and then you pivot. But again, you have to understand what it is you want to do, so that you're going in a positive direction.
That's good. Well, speaking about finding your path, well, after you graduated, you got your PhD in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and was the first African-American woman to get your degree at the University of Virginia. And that same year, you also started your position at Howard University as a faculty, and now you were the first female professor in the mechanical engineering department. After that experience, what led you to want to work at an HBCU, and what were the challenges at the beginning of your career in that transition?
Well, thank you for that question. Again, I think it really goes back to my family. I grew up on an HBCU campus. I, had the majority PWI experience, both, as a child, but also in graduate school. So I really wanted to give back to the community that really gave me so much. It's really something special when you can grow up around Black professionals, Black engineers, physicians, chemists, physicists, and that's not new to you. And it gives you something special when people tend to say, oh, well, we really can't find any, Black physicists, or, minority, women in X or Y, and no, I grew up with these people, so they exist. So it gives you something special. So I wanted to provide that same experience for my students. The challenges, I think, the challenges that I had at the beginning of my career are very similar to the challenges for any professor trying to get started. You have to get money, set up your lab, recruit students, and there fits and starts with that, and the rates of, grant funding. And, I think it took me about 3 years to really get my lab started and growing. But the other thing too is I've noticed, for myself included, but I also counsel others, I think sometimes when we go to our spaces, HBCUs, we come with sort of a romanticized view of what it's going to be. And it's very different from being a student, or, just being a visitor. A lot of times I find, myself included, you come with this view that, it's all going to be, an uplift and everything. And what you realize is that all these institutions are the same, and they have the same problems and issues that any other institution has. A misconception is that, all the professors and students are going to be Black. That's not true. The population is just as diverse, And as any other university, any other institution, company, what have you, and that comes with all the same challenges. And so sometimes when we come to spaces, we don't expect that. And so I think there was a challenge there in understanding that, yes, this is just like, NASA, it's just like any other place with the same, people, same diverse mix of people. And so really the same issues. And so, that was a challenge. And once you work that out, and, I'm fortunate to be at Howard University. It's a outstanding place. I wouldn't trade this for any other institution. I'm really happy to be here, and the things and the impact I've been able to have on my students and the community is just been invaluable. And it's just been a joy to work here.
That's awesome. Well, you spoke about the challenges, and I want to kind of narrow down as a Black woman in academia, yeah, we face challenges. From your experience, how did you become an advocate for women, especially Black women, as they navigate this field?
Yeah, so again, going back to what I said, HBCUs are just like any other institution. And after 20 years, I looked around and I was like, okay, why is it that I am still the only female faculty member in my department? And why is it that we don't see, Black women or women in general taking leadership roles, becoming full professors, and that kind of thing. And so I really wanted to work on that and see, what are the systemic, it's not a new problem. Like I said, institutions are all the same, and so there are some techniques to be able to work on that. So one of the things that I did is I formed a team, and we received a NSF Institutional Transformation Award from Advance. And so what we wanted to do is increase the number of female faculty, but in particular, make sure that those faculty members, that we don't just have this constant pipeline or churn of women coming into the professoriate and then leaving. We wanted to make sure that we had a retention program, that there were clear paths and support for them to move from assistant to associate and to full professors. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but a lot of times women, we either lose them at the associate level or they sort of tap out there, and particularly Black women, because climate and culture is, quite hostile. You have the micro and a lot of times macro aggressions, in departments. And this is not only in academia. I worked in industry as well. So, it's all there. So we needed some policies in place to sort of shore up our support for our women faculty. And so I'm happy to say that, as a result of that program, we did almost double the number of female professors at Howard. And so, and this model has been used at PWIs at all sorts of institutions. And so we needed that here at Howard. And so I worked on that. Also, and, through my professional organizations, once again, going to meetings, seeing, not when I started, I was usually one of the only women, definitely the only Black woman around in the room, or, maybe one or two others. And so I wanted to, once I got tenure, I wanted to make sure that, I was able to influence the workings of our professional society. So I'm now the chair of the diversity working group for AIAA, American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics, and where we work on those issues to make sure that the Institute doesn't have barriers to entry, because that's where you go to the professional organizations. That's where you make your connections. You're a program officer or somebody, might be there for the next project that you want to work on. And so we want to make sure that there are not barriers to entry there. A lot of times, for example, I see students who are working to pay their way through school, or at least supplement some of the funding that they have. And so we want to make sure that they have access, because, it's not going to conferences, being members of these societies, our professional societies, that costs money. And a lot of times people don't have the economic means to do that. So one of the things we want to do is provide access and sponsorship for people to come to the conferences, to make those connections, to be visible, and get that next graduate fellowship, get that next grant, get that next job promotion or what have you, and make sure we do that. I also work as the board chair for the American Society of Mechanical Engineers Foundation, where we're doing the same thing. So I'm working on these issues from multiple areas, but it's really a passion of mine to make sure that underrepresented groups, women, and particularly Black women, have access, and that they're not unnecessary barriers to entry into these spaces.
That's excellent. With your leadership roles contributing to the safety of women, especially Black women in this field, what do you see for the next generation of professors following in the steps of creating those spaces and opportunities so that other people can get in and stay in?
That's a great question. And what you'll find is, even though if you have buy-in from leadership at the top, which is a necessity, the touch points for women, and particularly as you enter these spaces, be it an aerospace company, be it a lab or what have you, it's the people and the climate and culture, what they call middle management. So the people that are right there in your lab, the postdoc, and the culture in that lab, culture in that group in a company makes a huge difference. And so I think for the next generation, for my generation and the next generation, we have to make sure that those spaces are welcoming and not hostile to our young generation of women in aerospace. And that means that, we have to check in, we have to make sure, we have to listen, we have to mentor, and we have to sponsor. So, when I tell my mentees, you definitely need a sponsor, and that person doesn't have to look like you. They don't have to be in the same institution. But that's the person that can make the call to help you, move along, to get, that's a person with tentacles. So people in my generation and above, we have to reach back, and we have to be those sponsors, and also be those mentors, and listen and help intervene when there's an issue. I check in, I have mentees and former students, all over, and I still check in with people that I know at the different places. Well, how is, Sideena doing? Are things going okay for her? That kind of thing. So I think that's important. And I think it's, in some ways, it's a lot. The barriers to access are less out now for women in aerospace. And I think that's wonderful. We're not quite there yet, but I think that the future is bright, given if we are good stewards of these relationships and these connections.
So, from your experience, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way as a professor and an aerospace engineer?
Information flows much more quickly now than it did when I started out. Excuse me, 1 second. Sorry. So yeah, information flows a lot quicker now than it did when I started out. Information flows a lot quickly, and access. So you can learn so many more things now through YouTube. You can take in information in so many ways. And I think so you have to constantly learn, and it's not just for me, and it's not just the books. That's great, but you can information flows so much quicker. I think it's very important that you are in spaces where information is being exchanged. Going back to the technical conferences, all of the cutting edge research, what's happening in the field, talking to people, those side conversations. I think that's become more and more important. There was a time when you could sit back and, read the textbook and those kinds of things, but you have to be in the spaces where people are discussing, what's on the horizon and what's coming on next. And I think that's very important. And so what that means for young aerospace engineers, students, young professionals, is that being active in your professional societies becomes even more important. because that's the way you're going to get access to the information. And so, we all were student members of, IEEE, AIAA, AS, all those things. And then as you so I'll get back to that. No, you have to maintain those connections to stay relevant. So I think that's one of the biggest changes. I don't know if it's a lesson, but it's a big change now. I think they were always important, but I think those activities are more important now.
Yeah, that's good. For those who are interested in industry or academia, what advice would you give to early career researchers who are, looking for jobs or figuring out what they want to do, and faculty that are advising students?
I think I think for early career researchers, I think it's a good idea to make sure that, again, that you stay current, that you stay, you're abreast of, the new information in your field. I mean, early on, as an undergraduate student or graduate student, that's the time where you're sort of defining, what you're interested in, but also realize that your interests will change. It's just because you're working on one thing now doesn't mean that's what you're going to work on for your entire career. It's not, and I'm not talking about switching different jobs. That sort of comes with it, different companies, different institutions. But I mean, actually, your projects will change. They may be adjacent. They may change because what you're working on today may be irrelevant, 5 years from now. Or if it's relevant, you may need to work on it in a different way. So I think the advice is to stay flexible. And if you can reinvent yourself, meaning that if you start out working in, I don't know, aerospace structures, and if you can reinvent yourself to work on different things and apply the tools that you have, the knowledge that you have to different problems, I think that you will always have a outstanding career and always be relevant. And I think whether you're early career research or faculty, you have to be flexible and what that means in order to do that, you have to be willing to learn new things. And it's great now because most of the information is right, or you need, is right at your fingertips. So there's, if you want to learn something new, there's no barrier to the information. And then once you get the information and you build the expertise or the knowledge, then you can start interacting with people at the conferences to see, okay, what's the next direction? And I think that's important. Just stay flexible and constantly reinvent yourself and constantly learn.
I think that's really good, learning that it's not just about that one project. Because I think a lot of students go in thinking, okay, well, I need to work on the perfect project because this is what I want to do with my career. But really honing in on the information and the skills to prepare you for what's next. So, but in addition to the work, for our next question, what advice do you have for people wanting to balance work-life interactions? And what is your favorite pastime?
Yeah, through the advanced program, I learned that we used to call it work-life balance. So it's really not balance, it's integration. And it's difficult, particularly early on in your career when you're trying to balance. I think you're always trying to balance a lot of things, but early in your career, trying to balance your, building your lab, hiring your students. It's really, really hands-on until you get a system in place where you have enough postdocs or senior research fellows in your lab that can kind of do some of the heavy lifting for you. So at that point, there's not a lot of time for self-care as much as you would want. I'm not saying that you don't take care of yourself and take care of your health, but there's not a lot of extras. But as you move forward, you can, once you get those things in place, then it's easier to make more time for, extracurricular activities. And one thing you can do is integrate those into your professional life as well. If there's an activity that is happening in conjunction with your professional society conference, many have like yoga, morning yoga or something like that. To integrate self-care, but also, again, building that professional network with with your peers. So as far as what I like to do for pastime, I'd like to play golf. I like to read. I like films. So I don't have a lot of time for that now because that takes a lot. But when I can, that's how I decompress. But sometimes it's important just to carve out some time for yourself for that self-care, those mental health days, and do something that you really, really enjoy. That's outside of just your day job, as I say.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And I think those moments where even if you only have 10 minutes to get a breath of fresh air, it can make a difference. So, but this has been a pleasure. And now we can open it up to the floor. If anyone has questions, you can raise your hand. I can show you like that. I think it's in the reactions. If you raise your hand like that, then I can call on you to ask your question. If it lowers before I get to you, just raise it again. I don't think I can see the participant.
I can't see them either. Yeah.
I'm watching the list to see if there's any raised hands. I think you can also drop questions in Q&A. Yeah, so we have a question from Caprice. Sideena, can you see the Q&A?
Oh, okay. I do see one. It says, do you feel like your idea of work-life integration evolved through your career stages? Yes, I do. So for the life of a professor, when you become assistant professor and you're trying to get tenure, and there was a lot less time at that point for work-life integration, the same work-life balance, because you're trying to learn so many things. You're trying to learn the institution. You're trying to, teach, build classes and lots of things. Similarly, when you start a new job, you have to learn your job. You have to learn the culture. Everywhere you go, there's a culture that you have to learn. There are different norms, and you have to learn your job, what you're supposed to do, what you want to do next, those kind of things. And so there's a lot. You want to get promoted at your industry job as well. And so there's a lot more pressure when you're the new person. You're coming into a new environment. The more you do that, you kind of get there were battle rhythm in place. So, okay, I'm the new person here. So these are the things that I need to do in order to establish myself. But yeah, there's a lot less time for, I think, work-life integration early on in some instances. I think that one thing I like now about our younger generation of the people, the early career professionals now, and also our companies and academic institutions, they're a lot more cognizant of the need for definitely the importance of mental health, the importance of your physical health, the importance of climate and culture. And I think, this has evolved as well. So probably an answer to your question is, if I were starting today, my work-life integration would probably be different because there are structures in place in many institutions to support that. I hope that answers your question.
So,
Also, there we go. So just to clarify, anybody who wants to ask a question, I know raising your hand can be scary. You can just drop it in the Q&A and Professor Smith can see it immediately. So don't be shy. We've got time for your questions.
And then this is an interesting question. So it's that do I feel that any equity mentoring work you've done was hard to balance with research and professorship as a Black woman in your field? Was it harder to balance? Maybe, but I wanted to do more of it because I felt the need why, being the only woman in the department and only woman in a lot of spaces, particularly the only Black woman, it's something that I wanted to do and something that I felt that I needed to do. A lot of times I know that my peers and others feel that because they are the Black employee or the Black faculty or whatever in majority spaces, that they're taxed with more of the mentoring of the Black students, more of the committee work, diversity work, et cetera. And I don't disagree with that. That may be the case, and it is harder to balance. But in my case, like with the work that I did with equity and inclusion, I did a lot of the institution-wide equity, inclusion, diversity work and mentoring after I reached a point in my career where it was, I don't want to say safe, but I had tenure, so I had more flexibility to do that. Early on, I did do a lot of student mentoring, but I wasn't doing institutional work until I had reached a point in my career where I had the flexibility to do that. But I really think it's important that we, as Black women, mentor and sponsor each other. I mean, as I said before, the sponsors don't have to look like you, but when we can sponsor, I think it's our responsibility to step up and do that. So it's work that, yes, it was probably, did I make some sacrifices in order to do that? Absolutely. But they're sacrifices that I chose to make. They were not, imposed upon me. It was my choice.
We've got an out loud question from Giovanni. You're on. You can speak. You should be able to speak.
Hello. I have a
Hello.
question. As a man who wants to really advocate and support for women in the workforce in general, how do I do that without overstepping?
Can you define overstepping?
Like, I would like to help say, like, oh, there should be, not women should have more power, but like, women are just as capable, if not more capable than their male counterparts in the field. But like, I'd want to do that without, speaking for them or speaking over them or feeling like I am the liaison for them. When in general, like that would, in my opinion, kind of undermines the fact that the whole point that I'm trying to not prove, but trying to speak on.
Oh, I understand what you mean. Yeah, I think that's a delicate dance. You don't want to be the person that is, speaking for women, but what we call a male ally, you can be a male ally and a male champion. And what that means is that, you will most likely be in spaces and in conversations that your women colleagues are not. And things may be discussed, impressions shared, maybe they are valid, maybe they're not, but that's your point to really speak up, when they're not there, to say, hey, I know, Sonya Smith, and that's not accurate. She's done these things, or I know Sideena Grace, whatever. And but that's your point, your opportunity to be an ally, because you will be privy to conversations where your female colleagues are not. And I think that's a valuable service. And also speaking up in meetings, not speaking for them, but speaking up in meetings to say. Speaking up in meetings to say that, or to support a position put forward by one of your female colleagues. Everyone has a story where they have said something in a meeting, and 5 minutes later, excuse me, a male colleague has said the same thing, and all of a sudden it's, it was ignored before, and all of a sudden now it's the greatest thing. So being a supporter, kind of watching out for those things. And sometimes people hear it differently. If you would say, hey, you know what? Jane just said that a few minutes ago, and that was a great idea then, and it's a great idea now. And those, those sort of things, women can speak up for themselves as well, but, providing that echoing foot stomp is also important. And I don't think that's overstepping, that's being supportive. I hope that answered your question.
That was perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Is there
There's another one.
Okay. Is there a time when you're working on a project and not getting it? Can you explain how you overcome it, if there is any? Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because just like people learn differently, if you're trying to learn something and you're not getting it, maybe you need a different explanation. So for me, when I was in school, we had the textbook, but I would also go and check out different books, on the subject, by different authors. And sometimes, explanation from a different author spoke to me, or, made me understand better than, my professor or what have you. That happens today. You're in a class, maybe the professor's style is not something that works for you, or what you're trying, or whoever's mentoring you is not communicating the information to you in a way that you can really take it in and understand. And so you just get another source, and it may not be, you may need more, 2 or 3 sources, and repeating it until you get it. So, I mean, it's not to say that person X or Y is wrong, just like we have different learning styles. People have different learning styles, and you have to put yourself in a situation where you can get the information you need to execute your job or your project the best way you can. So multiple sources. And as I said, the great thing now, I mean, there's a YouTube video, there's, online resources for just about everything. And so, or at least some part of what you're trying to learn. And so it's not like there are very few barriers to access now. So if you're not getting it from the explanation that's being provided, then go to another source. That's the best way to overcome it, in my opinion. I hope that answered your question. Put it back. There's one more question. What is my favorite research project? Well, let's see, do I have a favorite? Anything that has to do with space and aerospace. I know that's a cop out, but I do a lot of things. In my lab, as I said before, we apply tools to different projects. I'm very interested in thermal management. I'm very interested in electrification. And so the projects, I wouldn't say they're my favorite, but those are the ones that excite me the most, where we're going with electric aircraft, where we're going with mobility, autonomy is just really, really important. And those are the ones that are top of mind right now. So if I may, I would like to ask one question of you, Sideena. So what's next for you? I mean, I've watched your career for a very long time, and in my years, a very long time. And I've watched you, really, really blossom. So I want to know what is next for you?
Yeah, so currently with my company, I have 2 primary products. One is the pain relief that I've been kind of promoting a bit. And then I came up with another one for addressing communication delay, a platform that could potentially smoothen out some of the complications that come with communication delay, detachment from Earth, and all those things. And so I'm looking into hopefully partnering with an organization to hopefully get that platform tested through the commercial route first. My long-term goal is to be a contracting company with products for NASA and just the commercial industry. But I'm also interested in working at the Johnson Space Center and working with the astronauts. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. Were you able to discuss that with the astronauts that were on the panel on yesterday?
I didn't get to go to that, unfortunately.
Oh no,
but,
okay.
but I am making my connections through getting to, I know a few astronauts, so I'm making my way back to getting those connections and getting insights into that.
Right. So, we were talking, you asked me a question about outreach and the things that I saw, the changes in early career and younger students or, students now. You do a lot of outreach activities, and I'm just curious about your opinion and the changes that you see in the younger students as they're coming through, because what I see is that they have so much more access to tools and that neither of us had in school. So I feel like the early career, the younger generation that we'll see in university are going to be much more prepared than previous generations. Do you see that? Or I'm just curious of what you think.
I agree. I definitely see a lot of schools turning into magnet schools. So they're focusing on the STEAM, the coding and stuff. And so I think that makes a difference. I think the only changes that I haven't seen are the schools that don't have those resources and how it's a little bit slower to getting to those schools. But going to those schools and focusing on those schools, it really does spark an interest. And I do see kids seeing themselves in these careers. So I think that continuing to go into all types of schools, getting all types of children, no matter their background, neighborhood, interests, that there are going to be shifts. So by myself, I've managed to get almost 6,000 to 7,000 students in the last 4 months, and hopefully looking forward to partnering with the AIAA to help them get to 1 million. So I definitely think that there is change happening, and I do see a lot more students coming in prepared and normalized to the fact that they can be engineers and scientists too.
Well, I think I have found my next member of the AIAA Diversity Working Group. We pressed into service. Yeah, but and this whole idea of equity, inclusion, and particularly for Black people and Black women, it's a lot of it, I think a lot of what we need to do is make sure that we are in our spaces, that we're defining exactly what we are talking about. I was talking to another colleague, and it was telling me that one of his friends said it in the context of a race. So when we're talking about, equity, everybody can run the race. That's great. But, it's how you get to the starting line. And so, some kids' parents are going to drive them there. Some are going to helicopter them in. And some are going to, the poor kids, some are going to ride the bus. But those kids that live, farther away, way out, and can't afford it, they're going to have to walk, and they're not going to make it to the starting point on time. And so it's like, what do we do for those people? And, every once in a while, she was saying that, her name is Adrian, that every once in a while there'll be an outlier that a kid, who's poor will make it. But usually it's because somebody stopped along the way and gave them a ride to the nearest bus stop. So I think if we think about that equity in that way, for Black women, for Black In Astro, it's like, how do we make sure that everything that we're doing, that we are making sure that those people that, don't have access or funds or economic access can get to the start of the race on time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I see when I do go into schools, I do see teachers doing a lot of the work to do outreach to pull people into the schools. But, unfortunately, yeah, some of the students are going to have to walk, but I think that's where we emphasize letting them know who they are, because some students, they can't be what they can't see. And so changing that narrative so that they can get on track to going towards that goal and seeing what's out there. So about changing the perspective and just doing heavy work in those areas, because they get really excited, and it's really nice for them to feel seen, and to have all types of questions. There's really no difference when I go to a magnet school and when I go to a school that doesn't have resources when it comes to questions, when it comes to knowledge and information. And so understanding that these kids have the same thing to offer, and sometimes they're a bit hungrier than the other students. So yeah, I think we have another question in the chat. Or
Oh, it was someone saying how great your book was, and I just said I agree. It's fantastic. But going back to access, one of the things that I did when I was on sabbatical at MIT at aerostro is we started the aerostro HBCU program, because as it turns out, the department at MIT, they had never had any HBCU graduates come there, and they went to other places at MIT, other departments, physics, even mechanical engineering, et cetera, but they weren't coming into aerostro. Aerostro is one of the top, aerospace departments in the country, had no one from HBCUs. And so the program myself and Dr. Wesley Harris put together was to rectify that. And so, we've had our actually now our second cohort of graduates are coming to the department. But when we talk about barriers to access, I mean, if you're not, and this is talent that they're going to other programs, Stanford, Berkeley, all the top programs, but they're not coming to this one program. And so, which is also, very prestigious and tops in the country. So, barriers to access are, right in front of us. And I think we have to make sure, again, that when we're in those spaces, that we're paying attention and we're saying, look, where are you getting your, where's your pool? You say we don't have any Black, students or many Black students, but where are you looking? Are you looking for where they are? Because this group of students are doing well at your competitors, and they can do well here too. And so I think, one of the things, it's not just, with kids, in K through 12, it's also students and young professionals right in front of us. We have to make those opportunities available.
Yes, I think so too. Before applying to grad school, I was a part of a Woman of Color workshop at Harvard University, and that completely changed my perspective on where I could go. I didn't even think about stepping onto Harvard's campus ever, but being surrounded by very successful Black women in their PhD programs and giving me that perspective while also creating a community that I could network in helped me just propel into a world that I didn't think I could do. So I really love the program that you created to create that pipeline, because they have a bunch of pipelines everywhere else. But I'm happy that has been instilled to push more students to, be a part of a great program. So
yeah, if we're trying to make sure that we have more Black representation in aerospace and aeronautics, they have to be in the places where they're making those kinds of people, and everywhere, not just, so I think that's very important.
Agreed. Let's see. I don't know if there's any more questions. We can wait a second and see. I can't see if anyone has their hand raised. So
I don't see any more.
No, there's no raised hands.
Okay.
Well, if there's not any more questions, this has been amazing. I'd like to add, maybe in the future, going back to grad school might be in the cards.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that one. Yeah. I wasn't going to push it, but I was waiting for that one.
I felt that you were.
You felt the energy there. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's something that I'm looking into. And so I appreciate your mentorship and the work that you're doing out here, Dr. Smith. It's truly making a difference. And so thank you for being a leader in the industry and in our community to help open doors and keep them open for other students to come through and be successful in their career. So
Well, thank you. And if there's anything I can do to help you, just reach out. I'm here for it.
thank you so much. I
All
think
right.
there's one more question. Was your goal always to become a professor, or are there any dreams that you had to choose against?
Go ahead. No, I don't think I was, well, I didn't think that I would be a professor. That was definitely, I didn't think that I would do that. But I was happy at first, working at NASA. That was great. Everybody dream, well, not everybody, but a lot of us dream of being an astronaut and those kind of things. And so, I thought of that as well. But I really really liked research, and I really liked, being able to, drive and choose the projects that I wanted to do. So I knew that I would either be or after my PhD, I would either go back to NASA and be one of those people that was, driving the projects. And then the professorship at Howard came up. True story. I was copying my dissertation back in the day. In my day, you had to actually make paper copies. So I was copying my dissertation to put in the mailbox for my committee, and in the scrap paper there would be ad for Howard, and the deadline hadn't passed. And they had two positions, one in structures and another one in fluids, and I applied for the fluids one, and the rest is history. But it was just like, again, I think those were just tossed because it wasn't important to anybody in that space, but it was important to me because that was part of my legacy as a Black American in the US, and also a product of, HBCU. So absolutely.
Perfect timing. Awesome. Well, I think we can wrap it up here if there are no more questions. Like I said, Dr. Smith, this was a pleasure learning about your journey and providing us advice for our journey. Thank you everyone for joining, and best of luck to your journey as well.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a pleasure, and good luck to you and all that I know you're going to be fantastic.
Yeah, we'll chat again.
Okay, take care. Bye, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sideena and Professor Smith, so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.